So before I start my presentation, what I'm going to do is give you some context to who I am and what we do. Reslam actually stands for Remote Electronic Safe Lock Auditing and Management. So there's a nice acronym for where it comes from. And our first speaker spoke about the IoT kind of paradigm. Now, we fall even outside of that, I believe. We come from a space where we developed software which overlays on top of very high security locking solutions, safe locks that protect money in the vaults, in the reserve banks, in financial institutions. So those devices, by their very definition, have been certified by companies like VDS, EN, UL, up the yin-yang. Traditionally, locking devices have been around for hundreds of years, and I guess over the last 40, 50 years, you've started seeing electronic locking devices. But those things were never connected. They were never on the internet or even on networks. And traditional old school security managers will tell you, over my dead body, will I ever connect any cable of any type to my device? That picture changed very rapidly over the last, I'd say, 5 years, and over the last 2 to 3 years, every security manager is banging on the door saying, please connect my devices. Because everything from cameras to baby monitors to kettles to whatever have been connected to the internet. I sat in this audience 2017, and there was a talk by, I think his name was Gareth Long, the CTO of iKettle, and I found it fascinating because it was a practical demonstration of what can go wrong, how it will go wrong. So my talk today is to try and give you some practical examples of what we've done. We're not a huge organization, so a lot of the talks that I've heard are focused on, Bosch and government organizations and large teams and enterprise. But what does the small guy do? The guy that's got a small team of people, you just cringe if you think of the costs that are involved in getting yourself protected. Here's some guy in his garage building a device with an Arduino, and it puts the fear of whatever in me to think of how do you commercialize this thing, how do you make it safe, how do you make it secure. You unleash your baby, and heaven forbid you have a Flappy Bird moment where 10 million people go and buy your device, and there's no security at all. So the whole talk that I'm going to go through is really plays on the theme of winning at a game. It's a game analogy. And ironically, there was a lot of Italian in my hotel this morning until I realized Chelsea are playing AC Milan, so that kind of made sense to me. I kind of understood why all the Italians were here. But it's playing on that analogy of how can we win at the IoT, at the IoT game. So I'm going to share with you the practical things that we did along this road of going from a software development company that developed solutions for locking systems to eventually building our own IoT devices that connect into these high security environments. And what did we do as a simple methodology that we could protect these devices to the best of our ability? And we're learning every day, and we come to conferences like this to learn more. So the basic points on this is obviously we've partnered with experienced organizations. So we went out there and we looked for people that have got experience in the different areas that we were looking for help in. We didn't try to do it ourselves. We weren't the maths genius at university that decided to write their own cryptographic algorithm, because that is just a route to failure. We made these relationships interactive and reciprocal. So as we are members of IoT SF, we're also members of other organizations that are not related to this space. And it's interesting how you can cross-pollinate, and I'll discuss a little bit of that later. We each have something to offer. I mean, I'm standing up here today and sharing with you our practical experience, and I'll welcome you to, rugby tackle me outside and come and ask me more questions if you want. And I'm also here to learn from people that have done this. One of the themes in the IoT SF conference has been the supply chain and protection of the supply chain. But we also need to look at the end-to-end solution chain. Why was protection important to us? Because often we were asked to take our software, and it's like a child, your 3-year-old's first day at play school. You have to hand it over to the bank, and they install it on their network, and you never see it again. So how do you protect your intellectual property? How do you do that? And you know, there's a lot of clever people out there. All the hackers that you're talking about, they'd love to go and take a look at your code, reverse engineer it, take a look, just see how it works. Curiosity. So how do we protect that? The first company I'm going to share with you that we've done a lot of work with is a company called Weebu Systems out of Karlsruhe in Germany. They're a global leader in protection technology. They work with some of the clients you've mentioned before. They've got about 10,000 clients worldwide. And what we've used them for is our solutions, our back-end solutions, our server solutions, we encrypt the solution fully. So we have either hardware dongles or we have dongles that are fingerprinted to machines or even cloud-based, but we encrypt our code set completely. So when we hand it over to said financial institution, to said reserve bank, to said, you know, nanny at the 3-year-old's play school, when we hand it over, there is no way that they can decompile that software without the tools that we use to compile it. So it's quite important, but they also do provide other things. And this is a lesson that we learned in terms of what we want to do is if you want to license your software, again, if you have £5 million and you have a whole team building a licensing technology, great. What if you're a small team? Well, they give you a licensing model out of the box. So it's free and gratis to use. So you can go and license your software, and your developers don't have to spend time developing and doing all the licensing. And as I mentioned, it encrypts the code completely, including the resources, and we even encrypt our software running on the servers in these platforms. And it has helped us in a great deal when we've undergone penetration testing as well. My favorite is I always tell the penetration testers, there's a hardware dongle, please do not try and run any debugging software against it because it's going to break everything. And they promise me high and low, and 10 minutes later I'll get a phone call, the software is not working anymore. Well, I warned you. So it has really helped us. So that is an organization that have got a lot of experience all the way from micro-embedded stuff. I think the one speaker was talking about PLC connected units. They're very big in the IoT space where they have their USB dongle that we use for our code protection. They actually install in these devices that go into the production floor so that they can't be cloned because there's a way to hack it. You take a device home, you put your Arduino unit with a Wi-Fi connector in it, you go back, you install it in the plant, and suddenly you're knowing all the plant data. So they specialized in those kind of, and they've been a great partner to us. We've attended their conferences, we've understood a lot, and it hasn't cost us a great deal of money. So that's the key takeaway from that. The next thing is we wanted to have technology that did Bluetooth, NFC, and RFID. Now, in the banking environment, whenever you say Bluetooth, everybody, the security managers are, they're breaking out in sweat and they want to fall over because they've heard of all the vulnerabilities in Bluetooth. So, Bluetooth is a no-no. However, Legic is a company based in Switzerland. They are a semiconductor manufacturer and they build a chip that has a lot of advantages that we made use of. It contains an ARM Cortex M4 processor as its core, but it also has a secure element for running secure code in. And the biggest thing that they helped us with is that they have a back end that's available for you to use. Now again, going back to my thing about the licensing, same with the back end. You can go and buy a lot of chips out there that will do Bluetooth, that will do NFC, that will do RFID, and then you've got to go build your own back end. Now, again, maybe if you're a big corporate and you have a huge IT development team that can help you, that's a possibility. But for us, it wasn't. So we went to a vendor that could supply us with that whole tool set, that whole tool chain. Then the next thing we did is we partnered with a company that does bespoke high security design. These guys have been around for a very long time, since 2004, and the engineers come from a military background, so a little bit about what we were hearing in the other talks, the kind of Boeing, Airbus, redundant systems. They were designing military missile systems, etc. And they had experience in rapid prototyping and making secure devices. So we didn't rely on our on our own knowledge and our own instincts to build the electronics. And they also had a deep understanding of embedded firmware, which was not our strength. Our strength was developing back-end systems and transactional systems. They had the understanding of real-time operating systems. So we partnered with a company that helped us out there. And that gave us a big leap forward. And interesting things, for example, the use of MATLAB as a tool for developing secure software. There's components in MATLAB where you develop your software as a state diagram, and it will then produce what they call certified code for you. So whatever your state diagram is, they'll ensure that that code then runs in that, and they'll guarantee that code. Interesting philosophy. The next thing is understanding the rules of the game. What do I mean by that? Well, each of us play in our own fields. So in the banking environment, there's a lot of security overhead. Depending on which sector you play in, there will be different legislation. GDPR, if you're collecting personal data, so you've got to understand all those. And in the next slide, I'll cover some of those. You need to understand that certification. For example, our products have been sold in Europe, so we needed CE certification. You need to understand what that is. But more importantly, you need to let your customers know. We've come up against a lot of clients, and when we go and look at what certifications they have, you realize that these guys have gone and done a hack job. Just from our own security experience, we go and see what they've done, and we will let our clients know, have you checked that they have CE certification? Have you checked that in the locking industry they have EN certification or VDS certification? Go brag about it a bit. It'll give you the edge. And then, of course, be careful of regional nuances, because there are, in each region has its own stuff. So what we did ourselves, we started off. We've got an ISO 9001 2015 quality management system, and ironically, the audit is taking place today. I'm not there. So we did that, and it costs money. We've implemented 27001, but not formally, because it takes a lot of overhead people. So what we've done is we've taken the ISO standard, we've implemented it in our organization. Legislation we've had to look at, for example, in South Africa you have ICASA, so if you have any device that's Wi-Fi that you want to sell, you've got to get their approval. So there's a whole process there. In the US, you've got devices that need to go to the FDA, etc. And an interesting side note with our other client, Weebu, they've had a lot of examples where they've been able to save money by building one device and encrypting the firmware with their tool. So it's one firmware, whether it's the Rolls-Royce product or the cheap product. So they have one device certified, and then using their technology, they can sell it to a third world country with only certain features enabled, but with a simple firmware upgrade, you can then have a Rolls-Royce product, and they do that. So you can get one approval for one system. It's an interesting concept. As I said, in UK, you have GDPR and then CE, etc. Right. Be clear of what part of the field you're playing in, and then I'm going to just cover two briefly. The dark hole of patent protection. I don't know if any of you have ever patent protected any of your products. Anybody? Have you tried? OMG. Okay. So we've patented some of our stuff in the US, Europe, several countries in Africa, and it is it is a money pit. Again, if you're a big corporate and you've got a team that can do patents for you, great, but we have now started looking very selectively at that, because every year you've got renewal fees. It is an ongoing money drain. And why I call it the black hole is because you don't only have to have the money to patent your product. What happens when you need to protect that patent against someone? Then you need even bigger bucks and more lawyers to throw at protecting your patent. And then penetration testing is another thing that's often spoken about, and something you need to consider. And we have successfully done penetration testing on our solutions historically. So it is something to bear in mind, to always look at your end-to-end solution if it is going to be run through the gamut of penetration. And then this slide I'd like to share with you, because I do believe it is of value. So we've become members of, I mean, we've been with the IoT SF since 2017, but we're also members of the ATMIA, ICOA in the US. And all I can say is that I don't see a huge amount of cross-pollination between them. We have taken the strategy to join multiple organizations. And with the ATMIA, I sit on their Security Council. They've got over 400 members, which include many of the largest banks in the world, financial institutions. And I sit on those security calls. They've built an entire security system, which has over 1,500 cases in it, including big, the big organizations that look after security. And they were going to reinvent a whole lot of stuff. And I mentioned to them, go and have a look at the tools available from IoT SF, and everybody was blown away. So, there was just a small cross-pollination. And then I did mention partnering with experienced companies. Lastly, what I'd like to talk about is some of the things where there are kind of pitfalls. We cannot lose sight of the real game. For example, which I mentioned was the fact that we connected to non-connected infrastructure and had to realize the aim of digital transformation. So I'm going to skip over that. One of the best things that we've taken heed of is to understand our core business objectives. We've looked very carefully at that time, cost, quality triangle, which is why I'm giving this presentation, because cost is unfortunately a driver, and quality is the one that suffers. So vulnerabilities, you're rushing through stuff. We've tied into SWOT analysis and in our ISO process, and then stick to your knitting. And I'll give you an example of this. We were approached by a company to assist them with developing a active dye stain solution, which is basically an IoT device that can activate dye stain for your banknotes. Now, as a builder, as an inventor, it's lovely. It'll cost us $5K to develop. We had all the technology, we have all the boards, we have everything. And then you find out that it's going to take you $75,000 just to get one device through legislation. So you've got to be very careful what you wish for in life, because sometimes it can come back and bite you. Right, in summary, key takeaways. Going back to the game analogy, pick your team, work with experienced partners, join a club, become members of industry-leading organizations. Know the rules, understand your framework. There's not much VAR in this game, and I don't know how that would function. Be coachable. Things will change. Don't have a Kodak moment that you're so blinkered in your thinking process, and enjoy the game. Thank you very much.